remember learning about phonology that every language has a system, a phonological system that differs from each language. And an example I can think of is a friend of mine asked me, how come Americans, when they hear in German the word, let's say church, Kirche, they hear Kirche, whereas Brazilians, they hear Kirche. Does phonology answer that question?
It can.
Hmm.
So when we listen to language, when we speak, um, we have particular habits of speaking, and those habits of speaking inform how we listen. And so your example of the German word Kirche, in English, we have we don't have the h sound, and so we are not used to listening to that sound, so we try to make sense of it with the phonological system that we have as English speakers, and it might come out something like Kirche with a k. Some English speakers might actually use a sh as well.
Yeah.
And the same thing for Brazilian speakers who also do not have the h sound, and so they substitute it for something that they're familiar with because of these habits of pronunciation and of listening that we develop over the course of over the course of acquiring both our native languages.
And can you give us an example of more patterns that like in English, for example, phonological patterns that we can see?
Sure. So one that and a student, my students kind of like this one. So if you have a word like let's say bat,
Mm-hmm.
we creature, spooky, Halloween bat, and then you have a word like bad, which is pretty similar to bat. There's just the difference, in bad you have a D and bat you have a T. So okay, well that's the difference between the two words. And that's true, but there's another difference kind of lurking in the background that we don't pay much attention to, but I think, or we don't pay conscious attention to, but which I think serves a very important marker to help distinguish those words. If you pay attention to the way you say bat and compare that to the way you say bad, you'll notice that in the word bat, the vowel is actually quite short. But in bad, it's lengthened.
Right.
And this is not just for those two words, but anytime you have like bit or bid, there's going to be a vowel of different length or back and bag. So anytime you have a difference in that final consonant, the vowel also adjusts itself and shows a difference. And this is something we do automatically. We don't think about it. I'm talking about this vowel adjustment. We don't think about it. We can sort of fake it. So we can say bat or bad. I can make them artificially longer or artificially shorter.
Right.
But while we're just casually speaking, we just do this sort of thing automatically. And these patterns persist from word to word over groups of words that have similar properties. And phonologists look for that kind of thing when they study language.
It's so subtle that we don't, and it's so subtle that we don't notice it.
Right. Or if we do notice it, we could do anything about it, on a consistent basis. That's just our speech habits, and they inform how we speak and how we listen.
So I wonder, with these patterns, do we see kind of consistency across languages, or like patterns that appear in many or most languages, or are they very particular to each language?
As a practice, I start with the assumption that every language is going to have its own set of patterns that are, for practical purposes, I just think of them as separate from any other language.
Sure.
And after I work with them for a little while, I can then start to notice similarities, but you will never have the same pattern that is exactly the same from one language to the next, although there may be broad similarities.
Sure.
So I guess the question is, so is phonology a universal kind of thing?
Yeah.
And it is universal in the sense that all languages have phonology. All languages show patterns of some kind, but it's not universal in that there is a limited set of patterns that all languages kind of pick and choose from. Hasn't been shown to be the case.
Very interesting.
And how does one get trained in noticing these patterns in phonology? We in phonology and phonetics, we hear about things like allophonic variation. Can you tell us what an allophone is and how that plays a huge role in language perception?
Sure. So the example that I just talked about with bad and bat, we can talk about the length of the vowel a as being one of these kinds of variables. So for the word bad, the vowel is long. But for bat, the vowel is short. So we can say that the long A and the short A are allophones
Hmm.
of each other. They're sort of variations on the same basic, more abstract vowel.
Hmm.
And we use one in particular situations, we use the other one in other situations. And this kind of variation, this rule governed variation, is what we refer to as allophony. So allophones kind of combining together to show the categories of the phoneme that they belong to.
Interesting. The Can you give us another alphabet variation in English or even German?
Um, sure. So another one in English that's actually quite common that a lot of people know about, and certainly many of your viewers will have heard about this. If you have a P at the very beginning of a word, like say the word pot, okay, it's accompanied by this puff of air that you can feel when pot. You put your hand in front of your mouth, you can feel a nice strong puff of air when you say a word like pot.
Hmm.
But when you put an S in front of that to get the word spot, that puff of air all but disappears. And so we have a P that's accompanied by a little puff of air, and we have a P that isn't. And so those are allophones of P. And in our writing system, we spell them both with P. So at some level, English speakers think of them as the same thing.
Right.
But in fact, they are pronounced in very different ways.